Before we begin today's story, take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy emotionally driven stories that linger with you long after the video ends. These are the kinds of stories that aren't loud or rushed, but quietly settle into your heart. And if you stay until the end, you might find yourself thinking about this one longer than you expect. Michael sat alone in the living room, staring at the shadows stretching across the walls. Just hours earlier, his wife Claire had left. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't slammed the door. She had simply packed a suitcase and walked out. The silence she left behind felt heavier than any argument they had ever had. Michael tried to replay her final words, but they blurred together in his memory. The only sounds that remained clear were the zipper closing on her bag and the fading echo of her footsteps down the hallway. The house felt wrong without her. Family photos lined the mantel. Summer vacations, birthdays, smiling faces frozen in happier moments. Michael picked one up and traced Claire's smile with his thumb, wondering when that smile had stopped being meant for him. He thought about the quiet dinners where conversation barely existed, the late nights she spent at work, the way her eyes had begun to look through him instead of at him. The signs had always been there. He had simply chosen not to see them, believing love alone could hold everything together. Now the truth sat in front of him, cold and undeniable. He was alone. Michael walked into the kitchen, but the sight of two untouched coffee mugs stopped him. He had made her a cup that morning, hoping it might soften whatever distance had grown between them. She never drank it. Slowly, he poured both cups into the sink, watching the dark liquid swirl away like pieces of a life he could no longer hold on to. The running water only made the house feel emptier. He returned to the couch, trying to steady his breathing, but a weight pressed heavily against his chest. He wanted to call someone, anyone, just to hear a voice that could tell him this wasn't the end. But he didn't reach for the phone. He wasn't sure anyone would understand. Truthfully, he wasn't sure he understood it himself. Then the doorbell rang. Michael froze. For a brief, impossible moment, hope surged through him. Claire. Maybe she had come back. But the thought faded almost instantly. Claire wasn't the type to leave and return so quickly. He walked slowly to the door and opened it. Standing there was Evelyn, Claire's mother. Her presence caught him completely off guard. She wore a simple cardigan and carried a small bag in her hand. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held something deeper, concern mixed with quiet strength. Michael hesitated, unsure what to say. "Michael," she said gently. "May I come in?" He stepped aside automatically. He had expected anger, accusations, blame. Instead, she entered softly, as though she had come not to judge, but to understand. They sat in the living room. The same room that had felt unbearably empty only minutes before. Michael struggled to speak. Finally, the words escaped him. "She's gone." Evelyn met his gaze steadily. "I know," she replied softly. "She called me before she left." Michael swallowed hard. "Then you know she doesn't want this anymore." Evelyn paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people leave not because they stop caring," she said, "but because they no longer know how to stay." Her response startled him. He had prepared himself for blame. Instead, she offered understanding. And for the first time that night, the silence in the house didn't feel quite as unbearable. Evelyn didn't ask questions or reopen wounds that were already raw. She simply sat beside him, offering something Michael hadn't realized he needed: companionship. In the middle of his heartbreak, Michael glanced at her and thought, just for a moment, that he saw something unspoken in her expression. But he quickly dismissed the thought. His mind was too clouded with grief to trust what he saw. One question lingered instead. Why had she come here tonight? And as that thought settled in his mind, Michael realized something unexpected. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of something he didn't yet understand. Evelyn didn't rush to speak. She sat across from Michael with calm patience, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as if she understood that silence sometimes healed more than words ever could. Michael, however, felt restless. His eyes wandered across the room. The carpet, the coffee table, the faded corner of the couch. Anywhere but her face. Every sentence he tried to form collapsed before reaching his lips. Finally, Evelyn broke the quiet. "Michael," she said gently, I didn't come here to talk about blame. I came because I knew you shouldn't face tonight alone. Her words struck deeper than he expected. He had prepared himself for anger, for accusations about how he had failed Claire. Instead, he found understanding waiting for him. He looked up, confused. I loved her, Michael said suddenly, the words spilling out before he could stop them. I did everything I knew how to do. Maybe it just wasn't enough. Maybe I wasn't enough. His voice cracked and he leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. Evelyn leaned slightly closer, her tone steady but kind. Don't say that, she said. You gave her love, stability, a home. Sometimes people drift away not because someone failed them, but because they're searching for something they can't explain. Michael let out a slow breath, unsure whether her words comforted him or made the loss feel more real. Then why does it feel like I've lost everything? He asked quietly. Because you gave everything, she replied. And when you give your whole heart, the emptiness afterward feels unbearable. The room fell silent again, but this time the quiet felt softer. Hours seemed to pass without Michael noticing. He began talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He spoke about how the distance in his marriage had grown slowly, almost invisibly. About nights when Claire came home late and conversations felt forced. About pretending everything was fine because admitting the truth felt more frightening than ignoring it. Evelyn listened without interruption. She didn't judge. She didn't correct him. She simply listened. At one point, Michael looked at her and said, almost apologetically, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. You're her mother. You should probably hate me. Evelyn shook her head gently. Hate doesn't help anyone heal, she said. And I don't hate you, Michael. I can see your pain. You were good to Claire. Sometimes people just grow in different directions. Her kindness felt unexpected, almost overwhelming. For the first time since Claire had walked out, Michael felt the crushing loneliness ease slightly. He realized he wasn't just speaking to his mother-in-law anymore. He was speaking to someone who truly understood what it meant to lose something important. After a while, Evelyn stood and quietly walked into the kitchen. Michael heard cupboards opening, water running, the soft clink of cups. She moved through the space with calm familiarity, as though she had always belonged there. When she returned, she handed him a steaming mug of tea. Michael wrapped his hands around it, letting the warmth seep into his cold fingers. It wasn't just the tea that comforted him. It was the gesture. Someone caring enough to stay. They sat together, sipping quietly. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, dark and endless. Michael, Evelyn said softly after a moment. Pain has a way of convincing us that we've been erased. But you haven't been. You're still kind. Still strong. Still capable of finding peace again. He watched her as she spoke, noticing the calm certainty in her voice. It surprised him how grounding her presence felt. How the chaos inside him seemed to settle when she spoke. For the first time that night, he wasn't replaying Claire's departure in his mind. He was simply present. And that realization frightened him almost as much as it comforted him. The clock ticked past midnight. Rain began tapping softly against the windows, filling the house with a quiet rhythm. Michael realized hours had passed, yet neither of them seemed eager to end the conversation. Something about the night felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed to give him space to breathe again. Thank you for coming, he said finally. You didn't have to. Evelyn offered a small, thoughtful smile. Sometimes people show up, she said, because they remember what it feels like to be left alone. Her words lingered in the air. Michael felt a strange shift inside him. Not happiness, not relief, but the faintest sense that the emptiness surrounding him might not last forever. He didn't yet know what this new chapter would look like. But for the first time since Claire walked out the door, the house no longer felt completely empty. And somewhere deep inside him, a quiet realization began to form. This night wasn't just about an ending. It was leading toward something neither of them expected.